How y'all doing? I hope well. It's your old pal Melissa Joy. Was it recently? I don't know. Time has gotten really confusing during the pandemic. Either way, I got hooked up with a group called Knit for a Unique Fit, which in their words is connecting uniquely shaped hands with uniquely crafted gloves. Most of the projects are for knitters, which as many times as I have tried, has never stuck. But there was a post about making a set of riding gloves, and those are sewn. Now, I've never made a pair of gloves before, but a new challenge and getting to help? Well, sign me up. This is the journey of Mary Kate's gloves. I downloaded the tracing of Mary Kate's hands from the Knit for a Unique Fit Facebook group. Then I split the image in two, making a right and a left side. Next, I adjusted the color so that my lines would be very dark. The software I used was the basic photo editing program on my laptop. It's nothing fancy. It's not Photoshop or ProCut Tools or whatever. Anyway, then I blew up the tracing to her hand size, and I proceeded to check it over and over again. Being off 1/4 of an inch could throw off this entire project. Finally, I taped a piece of regular old printer paper to my laptop screen and very gently traced the image. Yes, I made my laptop into a makeshift light box, and it was perfect for my needs. I did this a few years ago when I was working on the Easter bonnet competition for Broadway Care's Equity Fights AIDS. I was glad to have the challenge, and I was tickled that we actually won. Anyhow, if you want to check that out, you can go to my website, which is www.misshonkouture.com. It was before I was making YouTube videos, but the tutorial is extensive, and there's tons of pictures. I retraced my faint lines using a Sharpie. I have to be able to see what I'm doing after all. I decided that making straps at the wrist to help secure and be a fun detail was the way to go. I texted a friend to confirm that this was a good idea. They totally agreed, which was great. So I used my wrist to figure out how long the strap should be. It took a few attempts. They wound up being 3/4 of an inch wide by 11 long. I also figured that having a buttonhole to feed the straps into would be cool and helpful. I put buttonholes on both sides. I then went back to my hand tracing and drew a 1/4 inch around it to accommodate for the volume of Mary Kate's hand. I didn't need too much since the gloves were going to be made of spandex. Jimmy then decided that I was done for the night. Over the next few days, I did have fittings for the Australian production of the show that I work on, so I couldn't get back to the gloves. I did, however, find an afternoon to go to New Jersey Textiles. Their selection was great, and their prices were even better. I'll put the address down below. I knew Mary Kate's favorite color was purple, so I was thrilled to find this. I did buy myself a black and white striped jersey, and I made myself a sailor top based off of a vintage pattern. The next day, I cut out the pattern. I cut out some spandex straps. I turned all the straps right sides out. I rolled them flat because you really can't iron spandex. It doesn't quite melt, but it changes the feel and screws up the embossing. I speak from experience. And then I fought with the buttonholer to make buttonholes in the spandex. I have a tutorial on how to do it, and it worked great on the cotton, but for some reason the spandex and the buttonholer did not want to agree, and I did it a bunch of times. Okay. Let's try these again. I eventually gave up and moved on to canvas. Cutting out and stitching the canvas went well. I trimmed down the seam allowance, and that was totally easy. But since my straps were thin and the canvas is kind of thick, I had trouble turning it right side out. There was a few swear words uttered. Luckily, I still had some purple canvas, so I recut the straps, pressed in the seam allowance, and did a top stitch to close. It did great through the buttonholer, but as I played with it, I realized it might not tie very well. So I decided to stop for the night, and that I was going to make 2 sets of gloves, one with the canvas and one with cotton straps. I went into my fabric stash and pulled this great purple cotton. It has a good amount of maneuverability, which means that it'll be easy to tie. So I cut, stitched, and turned the ties right side out using a safety pin. Then I made the buttonholes and opened the buttonholes using a seam ripper and scissors. Then I pressed the ties flat and top stitched them to make sure that the ties wouldn't warp or get twisted upon themselves. And I was very pleased and ready to construct the gloves. Yes, the straps were a bit trial by error, but I learned along the way. Like I said earlier, this was my first time making gloves, and I was really excited to have it be for Mary Kate. I traced my pattern onto the spandex. I knew I was going to use my tracing line as my stitching line, so I didn't trim anything just yet. I pinned the 2 layers together and sandwiched my straps in place at the wrist. Then I stitched them up on a stretch stitch. You have plenty of footage of me sewing. I don't think I need to include it. I clipped away some of the extra seam allowance. Somebody was a little jealous that I was not paying attention to him, so I gave him kisses. The last step in construction was hemming. I did this on a zigzag stitch and clipped away any extra fabric. Later, I packaged up the 2 sets of gloves and mailed them to Mary Kate. And here is Mary Kate with her gloves and her beautiful smile. Thank you so much to Mary Kate, her parents, and Knit for a Unique Fit for the opportunity to try my hand, no pun intended, at glove making. If you haven't yet, it would be really great if you've subscribed. I have a project that I've started researching, which I'm pretty excited about. And I still have part 3 of the shoe tutorials to film. Either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you real soon.